So I've just laid one of the central leaves now, so that we can talk about the next bit, which is overlapping the leaves. Now, I've brought a couple of samples. One of them is a white gold one, but it just demonstrates the point here. And here on this sample, I don't know if you can see there, there's a very, very thin overlap line where two leaves have overlapped each other, and that's what will happen if you don't necessarily put more gilding water on top of the earlier leaf. Whereas if you go quite heavily on top of the earlier leaf, then you can get quite exaggerated leaf lays, they're called, which is where you see effectively a double layer of gold, where you've got two bits of gold on the frame. Now I wanted just to show you these samples before we go ahead and lay our next leaf. And I've prepared two half leaves on my cushion there, and get that ready to go. And I'm going to go for the quite exaggerated leaf lay, and so I'm going to wet well ahead of myself on the, and initially look just up to the leaf, but then just very carefully just going to get a tiny bit of the gilding water on top of that earlier leaf. And now the way I'm going to lay this leaf is from the outside of the frame in, and that way it won't bridge onto that point, and it'll just lay itself neatly across. And now at various stages I can use my cotton wool. This earlier leaf that I laid, you can see a tiny little air bubble has come up in there and formed a bubble in the gold, and I'm just very carefully now, perhaps a few minutes after it was laid, I'm just going to tamp that down, and again very, very gently I can tamp down into the groove, and also maybe if there was any bridging across the groove here, I could just use my quill just perhaps to allow the gold to fully get down in there. And we'll keep going back over what we've done and tamping as it dries out. Just keep going back over and tamping with the cotton wool to get the leaf down. So again, the next leaf, and wet well ahead of myself with the gilding water, carefully just up to where I left it off on the last leaf, and very carefully, tiny bit of the gilding water on top of that leaf, and from the inside out, allow it time to suck on. I'm not careful, a tiny bit of bridging there, so just push it down into the groove. Quill. And there we go. Now, I'm afraid that's all I can really show you with laying the leaf, because I have to say it is a case of practice makes perfect, and you will need a certain amount of practice to get to that stage. However, don't worry too much, because one of the beauties of gilded frames is they have, or gilded objects, is that the water gilding has a life, and some of the little inconsistencies, some of the little folds in the leaf that'll form and so forth, these give it the life that it has. Because if we wanted absolute perfect gold, we'd coat it in brass, or we'd spray finish it or something like that. These are all going to add to the life that the finished product has.